doing a series on signs of the times and current events. We are living in some really wild days, as noted in Timothy. Talked a lot about how people will be lovers of themselves. There will be a lot of conflict and tension, right, between the people. So I'm gonna start a new series on signs of the times and kind of discuss some current events. There've been some really crazy stories that have been going on in the media. So let's break it down. Have some few news stories here that I'm gonna try to go through. I might not have enough time to go through all of them. So there's been a pattern of pregnant African American women who have been attempting to admit themselves to clinical care to deliver their babies. However, they have been met with poor medical services. What says here, Texas Black women in agonizing labor kept at registration desks. So there's been a video that's been going around, that's been going viral, of a Black woman who's sitting inside a medical office. It's like she's at a hospital or in the registration service center, and she's trying to get, she's just like screaming, in labor and in pain. And the nurse is sort of just treating her like she's there to get an eye exam. Didn't see any sense of urgency in the nurse. In Mesquite, Texas, viral video from Dallas Regional Medical Center shows 28-year-old Carrie Jones bent over in visible agony, saying she is in active labor while a nurse continues asking admissions questions at the front desk. No sense of, oh, we need to admit this woman to the emergency. She's in labor. Clearly, she's in labor. Her mother says staff left her in the waiting area for over 30 minutes despite her repeatedly stating, "I'm pushing and the baby is coming." According to the family, once Jones was finally moved towards labor and delivery, she gave birth just 12 minutes later, with the baby born stressed and covered in meconium, requiring urgent intervention. So this woman could have lost her child. She's sitting here obviously in labor. The nurse is just chilling, right? Um, this is an issue. A lot of people point to figureheads in the media. They say, oh, it's the president. Oh, it's this person. It's that person. But clearly, there's an issue in the American public. All right. It feels like there's like an American curse that's going on where the people are just losing soul, right? And compassion for each other. This woman gave birth 12 minutes later, and she had to sit in the waiting room for 30 minutes, even though she was clearly in agony, right? So, and then the baby required emergency intervention. They're going to get a check. They're going to get a check from this, because this is just crazy. The hospital has issued a statement saying it is reviewing the situation. Shit, what is it to review? The shit is on tape. You can see it. They say the closest thing a man can relate to a woman getting pregnancy is just a kidney stones. And I've had kidney stones, and that's some painful shit to sit and endure, even as a man. So I can imagine giving birth. You don't have any medications. You don't have anything going on. Then you're dealing with stress because your fucking nurse is registering you while you're in labor. What the fuck is going on, man? It's crazy. The hospital has issued a statement saying it's reviewing the situation, but the clip has sparked national outrage, especially among Black viewers who see it as another example of obstetric racism and the broader pattern of Black women not being believed about their pain level. There was actually a study done. I remember in psychology in my master's program was actually a study done on how people perceive different cultures' pain tolerance level differently based off of your skin color. So they did a study where they had like a little, sort of like a little immunization needle. I think the gauge was like super high, so it's like a really thin needle, and they just had different colored, races of hands on a table, and then they would have the observer sort of like rate sort of like their anxiety levels around each hand getting this needle stuck through their hand. And they said a lot of reports were on, a lot of people just believe Black people had just these through the roof pain levels. So they would just sit there and the Black hand is just kind of getting jabbed up. And they're just kind of like, well, Black people, they're used to dealing with pain. But as soon as it was like a white hand there and they put the needle there, they're like, oh my God, oh my God, this shit is so painful, So This country is having a serious mental health crisis, man. And it's obvious signs of the times, man. So it says here, the deeper story here is not just one bad interaction, but a context where black maternal mortality is several times higher than for white women, and where many black mothers say they brace for dismissal the moment they walk into a hospital. This TikTok is functioning like citizen journalism. It forces the public to watch a real time moment where institutional calm and paperwork are prioritized over a black woman's body, literally trying to bring life into the world. It raises the question of how much professional detachment is actually racialized distance, right? So, talking points: how the tone and body language of staff communicate value or the lack of it before any medical decision is made. Administrative violence, when paperwork and protocols are used to delay urgent care. The idea of obstetric racism, how race, gender, and power intersect in birthing spaces. Why black families are increasingly filming medical encounters for their own protection. And this is why we need more black nurses and more black doctors more than ever, especially in the South. Texas is no stranger to racism, racial histories, racial stories. This shit has just been out there for years. I've spoken on this so long. We even debated about this shit in college, man. Everybody knows Texas is racist as a motherfucker, like all the rest of the world. But Texas, very conservative. And that's why them removing these DEI programs is a joke, because if we remove DEI from hospitals and schools, guess what? You're not going to see a lot of black nurses. You're not going to see a lot of black doctors, right? Because the argument's going to be, well, you're marginalizing the white folks. You're pushing the white people out, even though they fucking dominate healthcare, government, and law enforcement, right? And that affects women who are giving birth, because now the chances of you seeing a black nurse or a black doctor, unless you're in a dominantly black community, are fucking slim to none, right? So, questions to ask: if this were a white woman screaming in pain, do you believe the response time and tone would have been the same? Why or why not? What does it do to black communities' trust in healthcare when moments like this go viral and institutions respond with vague, "we're reviewing" statements? What specific accountability and policy changes, triage rules, staffing training should a hospital implement after an incident like this? Then we have another incident of a woman going in labor in Indiana. Woman kicked out while she was in labor. Baby was born in a fucking truck. The mother later dies. In Northwest Indiana, a black family says Franciscan Health Crown Point staff kicked a visibly pregnant woman out of the hospital while she was in labor. According to posts and local coverage circulating online, her husband was forced to deliver the baby in the truck on the side of the road, and she was turned away after she was turned away. Family accounts say that as the woman's condition worsened, she was taken to another hospital where she was pronounced dead on arrival. The story has ignited anger in black communities who recognize it as part of the same pattern. Black women's pain, risk, and symptoms being minimized, even when the stakes are literally life and death. So this isn't just a Donald Trump issue, right? This isn't just a political figurehead issue. This is an American public issue. I want to say, I don't watch many of his videos, but I caught one of his shorts. Austin Holman, he made a really great short on his sort of justification for going abroad and traveling abroad and just sort of encouraging other African American minorities to do the same. And I agree with this man 100%. He talked about just the social temperature of American society, right? Where you can't just walk up to people, and connect, right? Like you used to do, before social media. It was just like, shit, everybody, I remember because I was there. You could connect better with the community and just the different opportunities. I agree where he was coming from. So it says this is not happening in a vacuum. Studies show black women are at least 2.5 times more likely to die from pregnancy related causes than white women, and rates of complications like preeclampsia are higher and more deadly. When a black woman is turned away from care, it's not just a mistake, it's happening against a backdrop of known disparities and decades of warnings. The core issue is triage decisions filtered through bias. Who is seen as really in labor, who is viewed as dramatic or non-compliant, who is treated as a risk worth mobilizing the full power of the hospital. They got this term going around called black fatigue. Apparently, the dominant culture, it's only like fucking 13% black people in this country, so you'll be lucky if you have a black person in your neighborhood. But apparently, The dominant society is just so exhausted, from seeing black people. And I'm not saying black people are saints, but it's not all black people are a monolith. You have different types of sects and classes of African Americans, but apparently people are just so tired and done with black people, right? And it's obvious because you're turning away pregnant women who are in labor, African American women who have a higher likelihood of dying from childbirth, right? So you're basically saying, die, you know. So key points. How "you're fine, go home" becomes deadly advice when built on racial stereotypes, the difference between a one off error and a pattern that matches national mortality data, how families are forced to become their own EMTs and advocates when institutions fail, why obstetric racism is not just about rude bedside manner, but about life expectancy. Questions to ask: why does a black woman have to be closer to death to get the same level of urgency and care a white woman often receives earlier? What systems, legal, medical, and financial, make it easy to turn a laboring woman away with no immediate consequences for the institution? How should hospitals go investigated? How should hospitals be investigated and held accountable when go home ends in a preventable death? All right. So then you have this whole controversy around Trump, Epstein, and the newly released emails. Newly released emails from Jeffrey Epstein's estate, about 23,000 documents in total, include messages where Epstein tells Ghislaine Maxwell in 2011 that Donald Trump spent hours at my house with a trafficking victim, calling Trump the dog that hasn't barked. In a separate email with journalist Michael Wolff, Epstein claims Trump knew about the girls and that Trump asked Maxwell to stop. House Democrats released these emails as part of a broader push to open the full Epstein files, while the Republicans-led oversight committees released a larger trove of documents and accused Democrats of cherry picking for political reasons. The Trump White House has dismissed the releases as a PR stunt, stressing that Trump banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago and that the victims in question, identified by the White House as Virginia Giuffre, had not accused Trump of misconduct and reportedly described him as respectful. What matters for race relations is less than salacious details and more about what this says about elite accountability. Powerful white men moving in circles where exploitation is normalized and the justice system struggling to hold them fully accountable. Even when I was on Twitter, you could see a lot of people still still fighting for Trump and advocating for him. Everybody could do what they want, right? This is a free country, but it was just interesting, how, when you're a powerful white male figure, the stuff that you can get away with, especially when you're wealthy, it's crazy. This ongoing secrecy around the full list of powerful associates fuels a sense, especially in black communities, that there is one justice system for ordinary people and another for the wealthy and well-connected. Talking points: how elite networks protect themselves regardless of party, while communities of color face harsh sentencing for lesser crimes. The double standard for law and order rhetoric aimed at black neighborhoods versus the quiet handling of white collar and elite abuse. Why full transparency around the Epstein files is racial justice issue, not just a celebrity gossip. The danger of making survivor experiences secondary to a partisan spin. Why is it so hard for the public to get a complete, unredacted picture of who enabled Epstein compared to how quickly black and brown suspects are named in mugshots and circulated? How does selective outrage, depending on who is implicated, shape public trust in the justice system? What would equal justice under law look like if it applied to powerful political figures the same way it is applied in heavily policed black neighborhoods? Right? Yeah, man, it's crazy. Healthcare workers themselves say racism is a crisis. A 2024 report from the Commonwealth Fund and the African American Research Collaborative found that 47% of healthcare workers nationwide say they have witnessed discrimination against patients in their facilities, and 52% say racism against patients is a crisis or a major problem. Staff of color and younger workers were even more likely to say that they've seen racist treatment. Common patterns include longer wait times for black patients, skepticism about their pain, inadequate discharge planning, and assumptions of low health literacy. This is crucial because it's not just patients complaining, but people inside the system are confirming what black communities have said for decades. When black patients walk into emergency departments already bracing to be dismissed, it's not paranoia, it is a rational response to a pattern that even insiders have acknowledged. Right? So even the nurses, right? The Commonwealth Fund and the African American Research Collaborative, 47% of healthcare workers nationwide say they have witnessed discrimination against patients. 47%. And 52% say racism against patients is a crisis. So that's about half. Louisiana versus Calais, Voting Rights Act on the chopping block. At the Supreme Court, Louisiana versus Calais is a major case that could gut Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, the part that has been used for decades to challenge maps that dilute black voting power. The case started as a challenge from white voters claiming that a remedial map drawn after earlier litigation found black voters were being shortchanged, was an unconstitutional racial gerrymander. Now the court has gone further, asking whether using race at all to fix proven discrimination is itself unconstitutional. Civil rights groups warn that if the court sides with Louisiana, it could wipe out one of the last tools available to black communities to secure fair representation. This is race relations at the level of power and policy. Who gets to choose the people who make the laws? The irony is that the law is meant to remedy discrimination is being attacked because it explicitly considers race to fix racial harm. Like being told you can't talk about race while trying to undo racism. For black audience, this feels like deja vu. Every time new tools are created to protect their rights, legal arguments emerge to weaken or erase them. I didn't know about that case. Florida map eliminates a majority black district. In July 2025, the Florida Supreme Court upheld a congressional map championed by Governor Ron DeSantis that eliminated the long-standing majority black district in North Florida and cemented a 20-8 Republican advantage in the delegation. Critics argue that the old district was necessary to prevent dilution of black voting power, uniting black communities from Jacksonville to west of Tallahassee. The court's majority said that reinstating it would be unconstitutional racial gerrymandering, right? So they use a lot of these terms. A lone dissenting justice argued challengers should be able to present alternative maps that preserve black representation while obeying legal standards. For black Floridians, this isn't just about party politics. It's about losing a district where black voters could reliably elect a candidate of their choice. It signals a broader move toward race-blind language that in practice leaves existing racial power imbalances untouched or worsened. You take away one of the few majority black districts in the state, you're not being neutral, you're transforming power away from black communities and toward whoever benefits already from the status quo. Wow, so they just erased that part of the map out. The war on DEI in schools and universities across the country, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs are under coordinated attack. The Trump administration's education department has pushed to eliminate DEI initiatives, warning schools that considering race in hiring, scholarships and programming could cost them federal funding. More than 30 states have introduced bills targeting DEI in higher education, with some laws banning DEI offices, trainings, and even certain types of classroom conversations about race and gender. At the same time, federal courts in multiple cases have temporarily blocked parts of these efforts, calling them vague and unconstitutional viewpoint discrimination. The University of Michigan, once a national DEI leader, recently announced it would close its DEI office in response to new federal directives, despite having invested nearly $250 million and seeing gains in first generation and low income students. For race relations, the stakes are huge. DEI has always been imperfect, but these rollbacks are not neutral, right? They're occurring at the same time as rising racial tension, hate crimes, and bans on discussing systemic racism in classrooms. So this is what they do when black people try to fight for representation. They use a lot of the language in the Constitution to state that it's unconstitutional and it's racial gerrymandering. Who benefits if schools are banned from running programs that explicitly address racism and unequal opportunity? How will students of color experience campuses where race-based scholarships, mentorship programs, and cultural centers are dismantled? With alternative space, and they have to acknowledge the black race, man, in this country. A lot of black and white people do not think alike. We have cultural differences. We have different histories, right? Different value systems. It's almost like you're just dismissing the black experience and you're just like, no, all of you guys have to fight for this stuff the same. And that's not how this world works when you're in front of a hiring manager or a boss who's operating off of that system of discrimination. They're like, hey, I don't want black people here. It's really unfair, man. I was talking to my wife about this shit yesterday, man. I felt like I was going into like a state of depression, man. I'm just like, you just get, tired of this shit, man. You really do, man. You get tired of this shit. So I have some more stories I'm gonna talk about. I have to get to work. I'm definitely gonna do a part two on this shit, man, because these current events got to be talked about, man. This shit is disgusting, man. This the state, coming from a combat veteran, man, who gave my life for this country, man, and you just come back and just see this shit that's going down, man, between the races, man. It's just disheartening, man. All right, you guys have a